Hey, I'm Ko, and I'm going to show you how I made this cosplay wig from Ganyu from Genshin Impact. So I'm going to start with an ice blue wig and a 35-inch pack of wefts in the same color, and I'll be leaving a detailed list of the items I used in the description below. Because Ganyu's hair is so fluffy, I want to add more volume and texture to it, and I use a crimper to do this. If you don't have a crimper, you can totally just skip this step. I just personally like the texture of it. So I pretty much crimp the bottom half of the extensions, and I do leave about 6 inches from the bottom just to leave it straight. And I take my flat iron and I run it through the hair slowly, and I pull it taut as it cools, so it ends up straighter than it did. And you can tell from the left from the right that the left is much more fluffy and texturized, but if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. So I just go ahead and do this to all the extension, or however much extension you're gonna use. And in between, you do want to apply a little bit of hairspray. And I just go over the same area maybe 2-3 times until it's as straight as I like. And you can see how much fluffier it is. It's so much softer now. It's so fun to hold. I personally don't mind the texture it leaves, but if you do find yourself with a problem area that's still too crimpy, you can take smaller sections of that area, and when you run the flat iron, just hold it a bit longer and take the piece and just hold it completely straight until it's completely cool, and it should be much straighter. And you can see it is much straighter. So now move on to the basic shaping and cutting of her haircut. Ganyu has like 3 distinct parts. She has like 2 sideburns on her side that are super long, and then an even longer mullet in the back. So first I'm going to cut her face framing pieces, and then I will grab 2 pieces of hair from underneath the lower layers of her hair and just separate them from everything else, as I kind of cut out her shaggy hair around those pieces pretty much. So typically when I cut wigs, I do just grab piece by piece on the wig, and if anything's too long than what I like, I just go ahead and trim it off. And you can see here, I'm measuring both sides out by pulling them out and seeing if they match. And whatever's too long, I just go ahead and slowly shred it off using this like up and down cutting technique. I'm not sure what it's actually called. I'm just running my scissors up and down to that point where it cuts, so it creates more and more layers and more of a fluffy, softer look for the hair. And you don't have to worry about getting the perfect length on the first try. This step is all about just getting the very basic form of her hair, so you don't have to cut too much. Just get something close to it and you should be good until you're comfortable, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to start from the bottom sectioning, and here I'm going to start adding the wefts in piece by piece in each layer to eventually become her mullet. So I'm going to take the wefts that we crimped earlier, or maybe you didn't crimp at all. You're going to take the wefts, loosely line it up with the area you're going to attach it to, and then trim it down to size. Now to attach it, you can either sew it or use hot glue. And I've done both methods. I personally like to sew more towards the bottom of the wig where there's less area to work with, and then hot glue on the top of the wig where there's more backing to the wig. But again, this is all up to you and your personal preference. But for me sewing here, I'm just doing a very messy, crude stitch which goes from the back piece to the front piece repeatedly, like a spiral almost. I'm not sure the official name of that stitch, but that's what I do. And it doesn't have to be perfect or clean because it will just get hidden once I start the next layer. So I'm going to move up 2 more layers of hair, and I'm going to add another weft. But this time I'm going to double up on it just to make it thicker. I want her mullet to be as thick as possible. And again, you can add more or less as much wefts as you want, according to your preference. I think here I used about 3 layers of wefts. And whenever you're comfortable with the thickness of it, you can go ahead, let everything down, and start blending it all together. I'm straightening the original wig hairs because they're so curly in comparison to the extension, just to make it look more cohesive. you can go ahead and start shaving down piece by piece, creating more layers in the mullet. Alright, here comes the scary part. Trimming the front of the wig. This is where everyone's gonna see everything, so I like to carefully cut smaller pieces doing the same cutting method, but just I do it more calculated and more slowly, and I always try to feather things out towards the end, just so it's not so blunt and harsh. And with Ganyu's hair, it's very fluffy and very soft, so I just keep doing the same up and down cutting motion, and I sometimes just trim off the ends if it's just too long. So once you're comfortable with the bangs, I move on to crimping and teasing the back of the hair for volume. Ganyu has like a very fluffy back of her head, so towards the bottom layers I just crimp and straighten it out again, doing the same technique I did for the extensions, but when it cools down I instead curve it back towards the wig, just so it has that wavy look. And you can get a similar effect just by backcombing only, but I just like the crimping technique because to me it does last a bit longer over time, and it does hold its shape more, in my opinion. So I do this about halfway up her head of her short hair, and I do anywhere else on the wig that I want it to be more fluffy. So now we're moving on to forming the ahoge. Ahoge? I really don't know how to say that, and I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying it wrong. I'm so sorry in advance. But I'm going to pretty much do the same technique. I crimp it, put hairspray, I straighten it, I put hairspray, and I hold it up until it stands up completely straight. Now I'm going to take my backcombing comb and I backcomb the base so it's more stiff towards the bottom. And the flat iron is a big help here, as it can help shape the ahoge into its correct form. And with styling this piece, you don't want too much hair in it because it will weigh it down and prevent it from standing up straight. So as I go along, I do trim the end of it shorter and shorter and feathering out the end so that it can become a smooth point and stand up over time. So now I'm going to move on to styling the little waves and spikes on the front of her hair. I just do the same shaving method, just a little bit smaller now to get it more fluffy. And I use just a touch of hairspray, and I use my fingers to form each kind of individual spike that needs to be placed. And don't be afraid to trim along the way as you go. Now if you want a certain spike or wave to face a certain way, you can use a bit of hairspray and use your flat iron to kind of flip it out in the direction you want. And make sure it's short and thin enough to hold that style. And to finish off every spike, I just hit it with a little spritz of hairspray and form the point with my fingertips and cut off any excess hair on the ends. So now that I'm done styling the top of the wig, I move on to styling the bottom of the wig. Now to curl the sideburns, I'm using a flat iron and a PVC pipe along with hairspray along the way. I do just flat iron the sideburn, roll it up with a PVC pipe, let it cool completely, and then loosely brush it out with my fingers. And I do this with both the sideburns along with the bottom of the mullet. And I'm just going to make sure every time I style something, I'm going to lock it in with hairspray once I'm satisfied. Now an extra step I'm going to do is create the same gradient she has in her hair in the game with airbrush. And start painting lightly from the bottom going up. And I paint pretty far away because I don't want the paint to get too wet on the hair and ruin its shape and style. That's why I kind of paint far away to kind of prevent that from happening. And I just do this for both sideburns and the bottom of the mullet. Each time I paint, I kind of rotate the piece of hair around, or I change my angle just so I can get each and every angle possible to keep that gradient going around. And I make sure to be very careful not to paint anything else than what I'm intending to paint. So that's why I'm painting on top of a sketchbook. And with that, the wig is done. And that's how I made my very own Ganyu wig. I hope you found this video helpful in some way, shape, or form. Be sure to check out our website for more anime and Genshin props. And thanks for watching!